My name is Margaret Davis. I'm 65, a retired psychology professor, and a grandmother to the sweetest 9-year-old boy you could ever meet. My son, Daniel, was my pride, steady, kind, the kind of man you pray your child will become, which is why the call at 2:17 a.m. felt like the ground opening beneath me. The deputy's voice was careful, the way you'd speak to a startled animal. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your son collapsed tonight. A brain aneurysm. He didn't make it." I sat there in the dark, the phone buzzing against my ear long after he'd hung up. The furnace kicked on with a hollow whoosh, and I stared at the wallpaper like it might suddenly split and explain how I'd woken up in a nightmare. My Daniel, gone at just 35, by the time I reached the church for his funeral, I felt like I was moving underwater. The pew creaked under my weight, hymns swirled overhead, and the air smelled thick with lilies. I couldn't stop staring at the casket draped in roses. And then came Olivia. She swept into the room draped in black silk, her hair perfectly curled, mascara trailing down her cheeks like she'd painted it there. She clutched a tissue in her hand, dabbed at dry eyes, and wailed loud enough for the last row to hear. The congregation murmured sympathetically, but I heard something else, a hollow note in her sobs, the absence of true grief. I wanted to believe I was just bitter, but then I saw my grandson, Oliver, sitting alone, his little legs swinging under the pew, clutching his father's old wristwatch. His mother didn't reach for his hand, didn't kneel to comfort him. She was too busy glancing over shoulders, checking who watched her perform. As I stood to deliver a eulogy, I caught sight of Mr. Reynolds, Daniel's longtime attorney. He leaned in as I passed and whispered, "Margaret, tomorrow, at the reading. Trust your instincts." Daniel left. Instructions. My throat tightened. Instructions? About what? I thought of Daniel's last words to me, just 2 nights before the aneurysm stole him away. "Mom, if anything ever happens, promise me you'll look after Oliver." At the time, I brushed it off, told him not to be morbid. Now those words clanged in my ears like a warning bell. As the service ended and mourners drifted out, Olivia stood by the casket, her hand resting on the polished wood, but her eyes, they weren't wet anymore. They were sharp, calculating, like she was already somewhere else. And deep in my chest, beneath the grief, something fierce and immovable stirred. If she thinks she's going to take that boy away from me, she doesn't know me at all. The following afternoon, I walked up the steps to Mr. Reynolds' office with a heaviness in my chest. The brass letters on the glass door shimmered in the sun, but I hardly noticed. All I could hear was the echo of his words at the funeral. Daniel left instructions. Watch carefully. Inside. The reception smelled of old wood polish and coffee that had been on the burner too long. Olivia was already there, sitting cross-legged, tapping her long nails against her phone screen. She wore a fitted black dress, her heels crossed neatly, as though she were at a business meeting, rather than waiting to hear her husband's last words. When she looked up at me, her smile was sweet, almost sugary. "Margaret," she said, tilting her head just so, "we'll get through this together." I nodded, though my pulse raced. I knew that tone, placating, rehearsed, a performance for an audience of one. Mr. Reynolds ushered us into his office, closing the door softly. His desk was neat, stacked with files, and in the center sat a sealed envelope. He cleared his throat and began to read aloud. "To my wife, Olivia. I leave the vacation property in Vermont. the sum of $500,000 from my life insurance policy and my investment accounts. Olivia's lips parted in a small, satisfied smile. She tilted her chin toward me as though to say, "See, he loved me more than you thought." Reynolds paused, adjusted his glasses, and continued. "To my mother, Margaret Davis, I leave my primary residence, both of my vehicles, and my personal accounts. I also establish a trust fund for the education and welfare of my son, Oliver James Davis, with Margaret as trustee." The air in the room seemed to shift. Olivia's smile froze. Her hand tightened around her tissue, knuckles turning white. "What?" she snapped. That can't be right. Daniel wouldn't. He knew Oliver needs me. Not her." Reynolds met her eyes, unflinching. "These are Daniel's wishes. They were signed and notarized 3 months ago." He slid the envelope toward me. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. I recognized Daniel's tidy script immediately. "Mom, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened. I know you've seen things I tried to ignore. Olivia's choices worry me. I don't want my son growing up without stability. Please, be his guardian. Be his safe place. I trust you more than anyone." My throat tightened until I thought I might choke. Tears spilled at last, hot and unstoppable. I clutched the letter to my chest as Olivia sat stiff beside me, her face a mass cracking at the edges. In that silent office, I understood. My son had handed me both his legacy and his greatest treasure, and across the desk sat a woman who wasn't grieving. She was calculating. For a few quiet days after the reading, Olivia played the part of the grieving widow with perfect precision. She came by with casseroles from neighbors, set them on the counter as if she'd prepared them herself, and sighed dramatically when the conversation turned toward Daniel. But when the neighbors left, her mask slipped. One evening, as Oliver colored at the table, Olivia leaned against the refrigerator with her arms crossed. "You know, Margaret," she said lightly, "this house was meant for a family. You rattling around here by yourself doesn't make sense. It would be better for Oliver if he stayed here with me. You could downsize, maybe get a condo closer to campus." I stirred a pot of soup, forcing my hands to stay steady. "We'll take things one step at a time," I answered softly. She smirked, as if I just confirmed her plan. "Good, because Oliver belongs with me. I'll make sure he has the life Daniel wanted for him. Private school, summer camps, things you can't really provide on your retirement checks." Her words cut deeper than she knew. I could have snapped back, could have told her I knew about Richard Carter and her secret texts, but Daniel's letter echoed in my head. Be strong, protect Oliver. So instead, I smiled faintly, stirred the soup again, and let her believe she'd unsettled me. That night, after Oliver had gone to bed, I opened the old leather notebook I'd kept since my teaching days. Every word Olivia had said, I wrote down. The way she dismissed me, the way she spoke of Oliver as if he were leverage instead of a child. I documented it all, my pen scratching across the page like a quiet promise. 2 nights later, she arrived breathless at my doorstep, tossing her purse onto the couch. I'm swamped, she announced. You'll have to keep Oliver for the weekend. I'm heading out of town for a business retreat. Her perfume lingered after she swept upstairs to kiss Oliver goodnight in haste. Minutes later, she was gone, the tires squealing against the pavement. Oliver looked up at me from the staircase, his pajamas bunched at his ankles. Grandma, is Mom coming back tomorrow? I crouched down, brushing his hair from his forehead. She has some things to do, sweetheart, but I'll be here. Always. When he finally drifted to sleep, I walked to the living room, adjusted the small camera hidden near the bookshelf, and whispered into the quiet, "I see you, Olivia, and I won't let you win." The following week, the house phone rang, just as I was folding Oliver's laundry. I almost ignored it, but when I answered, a warm male voice asked for Olivia. "Tell her it's Richard," he said casually, as though I should already know. My heart gave a jolt. I murmured that she wasn't home and hung up quickly, but the name clung to me. That evening, Olivia breezed in carrying a new handbag, her hair still damp from a shower. Oliver ran to her, arms wide, but she stooped only long enough to brush his head before pulling away. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said, dropping her bag on the counter. I braced myself. "I can't keep living in that little rental," she said, her eyes sharp, her smile brittle. "This house was Daniel's dream, and I deserve it. You can move somewhere smaller. If you sign it over, I'll make sure Oliver stays comfortable. With me. It's what Daniel would have wanted." Her voice was silky, but underneath it, I heard the steel. I thought of the half-burned candle on the mantel, the one Daniel's hands had once lit during Thanksgiving. He had wanted his son to grow up surrounded by family, not used like a bargaining chip. I let my face crumple, as though her words had struck me down. I'll think about it," I whispered. Her smile widened. "Good. I'll bring papers soon. We'll make it official." When the door slammed behind her, I exhaled the breath I'd been holding. My pulse thundered in my ears. She truly believed I would hand over my grandson for a house and a pair of cars. I reached for my notebook and began writing. Every word she'd said, every manipulative phrase, every time she had used Oliver as a lever, I wrote it down. Then I opened my laptop and transferred the recording from the hidden camera in the living room. The tiny device had caught her entire performance, right down to the moment she smoothed her blouse and demanded her deal. Later that night, I sat with Oliver as he finished his science project. He held up the shoebox filled with papier-mâché mountains and cotton clouds. "Do you think Dad would like it?" he asked quietly. I swallowed hard, brushing his hair back. "He'd be so proud. Oliver, he'd say it's the best volcano he's ever seen." His face softened, but I could still see the shadow of worry in his eyes. When he finally fell asleep, I returned to my desk, slid the flash drive into an envelope, and wrote Mr. Reynolds' name across it. My hand was steady now. "Daniel, you were right. I thought she's hiding something. And I'm going to find out what—" It was a gray morning when Olivia arrived unannounced, her heels clicking on the front steps like the impatient tick of a clock. Oliver was sprawled on the floor with his toy cars, humming to himself. I was sorting through the mail when she tossed her designer handbag onto the counter with a practiced sigh. "We need to stop pretending. Margaret," she said, lowering her sunglasses. Her eyes were cool, calculating. "This house, it's not really yours. Daniel wanted us, me and Oliver, to have it. You know that. And you don't even drive anymore. So why keep both cars?" I stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air. She leaned closer, her perfume heavy with something sharp and unfamiliar. "Here's the deal. You sign over the house and one of the cars, and I'll make sure Oliver stays with you half the time. You can still be his sweet grandma, bake your cookies, read bedtime stories, but he belongs with me. Margaret, that's non-negotiable." For a split second, I saw not a grieving mother, but a woman bargaining in a boardroom, closing a deal. My heart pounded so loudly I thought Oliver might hear it. I wanted to shout, to tell her I knew about Richard, about Miami, about the weekends she abandoned her son. Instead, I forced my lips into a trembling smile. I'll think about it, I said softly. Her whole body seemed to relax, as if she'd already won. Good. I'll have Reynolds draft the papers. It'll be easier this way. Oliver looked up from the floor. His toy car paused mid-crash. Mom, are you coming to my game Saturday? He asked, hope shining in his voice. She smoothed her hair and offered him that same hollow smile. We'll see, honey. I'll try. The moment she left, I exhaled. My hand went automatically to the hidden camera tucked by the bookshelf. I checked the tiny red light, still glowing. Every word she'd spoken, every cold bargain had been captured. I retrieved the memory card and placed it in a small envelope, scribbling for Mr. Reynolds across the front. That night, after Oliver was asleep, I drove to Reynolds' office. The streets were damp with rain, traffic lights reflecting red and green on the pavement. My heart thudded in my chest as I slid the envelope across his desk. He plugged the card into his computer. We listened together. Olivia's voice filled the quiet office, demanding the house in exchange for her own child. Reynolds' jaw tightened. This, he said, tapping the desk, is exactly what we needed. We'll petition for emergency custody tomorrow. I nodded, my throat tight but my resolve firm. For the first time since Daniel's death, I felt a current of strength running through me. Olivia thought she'd cornered me. She had no idea the fight was just beginning. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and coffee, its marble floors echoing with hurried footsteps. I clutched Oliver's small hand as we walked through the double doors. Mr. Reynolds steady at my side. My heart hammered so fiercely I wondered if everyone could hear it. Inside the courtroom, Olivia sat with a new attorney, her hair styled to perfection, her suit crisp. She looked every bit the picture of composure until her eyes met mine. There was a flicker there, sharp and angry. Before she leaned in to whisper to her lawyer, Judge Hamilton entered, a tall man with silver hair and a voice that filled the room. We're here today to consider an emergency petition for temporary guardianship of Oliver Davis, he announced. Reynolds presented our evidence first. He played the recording from my hidden camera, Olivia's voice echoing through the chamber. Sign over the house, and I'll let you see Oliver. Gasps rippled across the benches. My cheeks burned with shame for her. Though she sat stone-faced, her attorney scribbling furiously. Then came the receipts, hotel bills from Miami, charges that appeared while Oliver was home with me, photos of Olivia on social media, cocktails in hand, draped across Richard Carter's arm, and finally, my journal entries, dated and signed, documenting Oliver's night spent waiting at the window for a mother who never showed. When Reynolds finished, the silence was heavy. Judge Hamilton steepled his fingers. Mrs. Davis, he said to Olivia, do you have a response? Her lawyer rose quickly. Your Honor, these are the actions of a grieving woman making poor choices. My client is Oliver's mother. She loves him. She deserves to raise him. The judge's gaze never left Olivia. Do you dispute the authenticity of this recording? Her lawyer hesitated. No, Your Honor, but that will be enough. Judge Hamilton's voice cut clean through the room. He looked directly at me. Mrs. Davis, you are granted temporary guardianship for 60 days. During this time, Oliver will remain in your care. Mrs. Olivia Davis will have supervised visitation only, twice a week. My breath caught beside me. Oliver squeezed my hand, not fully understanding, but sensing the relief that swept over me. Olivia's chair screeched as she stood, her face a mask of fury. "This isn't over," she hissed across the aisle. But as I looked down at my grandson, his small fingers wrapped around mine, I knew the tide had shifted. Daniel's trust in me hadn't been misplaced. For the first time since his death, I felt I'd kept my promise. The court's temporary order should have calmed my heart, but it only sharpened Olivia's fury. For the first 2 weeks, she arrived at the visitation center in downtown Columbus, all smiles for the social worker. But the minute she and Oliver were left alone in the small playroom, her mask cracked. I knew because the staff told me afterward. She spent more time texting than playing with him, and when Oliver tried to show her a drawing, she waved him off like a child tugging at her sleeve during a commercial. Still, the court gave her the chance to prove herself. She didn't take it. One Saturday, she simply didn't show up. Oliver sat on the little plastic chair, swinging his feet, clutching the drawing he'd made for her. After an hour, the social worker and I coaxed him into leaving, but his silence in the back seat as I drove home was louder than any tantrum. That night, I found myself at the kitchen table long after he'd gone to bed. Daniel's letter spread out beside my notebook. Be strong. Protect him. I read it over and over, tracing the ink with my fingertip, wondering how my son had seen what I'd refused to acknowledge. The next week, a new storm rolled in. Mr. Reynolds called me to his office, his face grim. "She's hired new counsel," he said, "and they're filing for a change of venue. She claims Ohio courts are biased against her. She's angling to move the case to Arizona, where she and Richard are planning to relocate." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. If she got Oliver across state lines, especially out of the country, I might never see him again. "She'd take him away from everything he knows," I whispered. Reynolds nodded. "We're filing for a travel restriction immediately, but we need to be ready for her next move. This isn't over." That weekend, she surprised me. Instead of showing up late, she arrived early and asked if we could meet at the park. Oliver was thrilled, so I agreed, though suspicion churned in my stomach. At the park, the air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Oliver ran ahead to the swings, laughing as his sneakers kicked at the air. Olivia sat beside me on the bench, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She pulled an envelope from her purse, handed it to me without looking up. "I talked it over with Richard," she said flatly. "I'm leaving the country. I can't be tied down. You want him? He's yours. Sign the house over, and I'll disappear." I stared at her, the envelope heavy in my lap. She was offering to trade her son for a set of keys. My pulse roared in my ears. This was the moment Daniel had warned me about. The bargain with the devil had arrived. The envelope trembled in my hands, heavier than paper had any right to be. Oliver's laughter carried from the swings, the sound of childhood that should have anchored his mother to this earth. Yet here she was, sliding her sunglasses higher on her nose, impatient for me to agree to her bargain. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't need to. I could already see the outlines of legal documents inside. Her surrender disguised a strategy. My voice was low when I spoke. "You're really willing to give up your son for a house and a car?" She stiffened, but didn't answer. Instead, she rose from the bench, her heels sinking into the mulch. "You'll take good care of him," she said flatly. "You wanted this, didn't you?" And then she walked away, leaving her perfume behind like the ghost of a promise she never intended to keep. I sat there frozen, the cool autumn wind tugging at my scarf. Oliver hopped off the swing and ran toward me, cheeks pink, hair sticking up. "Did you see how high I went, Grandma?" He laughed, oblivious to the storm that had just shifted his life. I hugged him tightly, Pressing my cheek against his, I saw sweetheart, higher than ever. Within days, her attorney filed the official papers, voluntary relinquishment of custody. Judge Hamilton read them aloud, his eyebrows arched in disbelief. He signed the order, his gavel falling with a hollow thud that sounded like both an ending and a beginning. 6 months later, Oliver's laughter filled my house in ways Daniel's voice once had. We built routines together, school mornings with pancakes, evenings at the kitchen table doing homework, weekends at soccer fields. He still asked about his father sometimes, and together we lit candles on Daniel's birthday, telling stories about the man who had loved him more than life itself. 3 years passed before I could read Daniel's final letter without breaking down. It had been tucked into a second envelope, sealed with his steady hand. Mom, if you're reading this, it means everything has settled. Thank you for being the fortress I always knew you were. Tell Oliver his father loved him every second of every day. I folded the letter gently and placed it in a frame beside Oliver's school photo. My boy, my grandson, was smiling, whole, and safe. As I stood at the kitchen window watching him chase fireflies in the dusk, I whispered into the twilight, "He's safe, Daniel, just like you asked, and I'll keep him safe for as long as I draw breath."